Mac Power Users, episode 620, The State of Apple, 2021. Hello, everyone. This is David Sparks, and I'm joined by my pal today, Mr. Stephen Hackett. How are you today, Stephen?
I'm good, David. How are you?
I can't believe this is the last show of the year.
I know. Wild.
I don't know if it's the COVID thing or what, but it seems to me like time has really accelerated on me the last little while.
I think it's the COVID thing. I mean, we're rounding the corner into year 2 and all that comes with it.
Yeah.
But it's the holidays. I hope everyone out there is enjoying time with friends and family and some time off from work. Basically, like this show and Connected are the only things I've done the last week or so of the year. So,
nice.
So just recording a couple of shows, and it's the end of the year, so we'll get to what we're doing today. But first, I wanted to see how your RSS feed migration business went, and if there's anything readers of MacSparky need to know, or if everything's cool.
Everything's generally pretty cool. The site migration, I moved the site to WordPress. I've got a whole bunch of stuff I'm doing, gang. I'll tell you more about it next week. But I moved the site. It went fine. There were some inconsistencies in the naming over the year. I mean, I've been writing MacSparky for I think 12 or 13 years now. So some of the redirects didn't work just right, but I've got somebody helping me on the back end to do those and get those fixed up. So we're capturing, we're logging 404s and fixing them as we find them. And I think largely it's done now, but there's a couple little things, like if you find an article I wrote on the web and it goes 404, we're fixing those as fast as we find them. But that's kind of done. And the RSS redirect worked. I thought it would, but you always worry, right? But so if you're on the old RSS feed and you hit that, it's just going to go over to the new one, and you shouldn't have to change anything. But if you're not getting my articles and you're subscribed to the RSS feed for MacSparky, the new one is a lot easier and frankly more consistent. It's macsparky.com/feed. So just go there and sign up, and you're good. And all in all, for a website transition, it was remarkably smooth, and I don't ever want to do that again.
Yeah, it's wild to me that MacSparky and 512 Pixels, I guess, are pretty much the same age.
Yeah.
I feel, looking back, that I joined the writing thing so much later than everybody else. But really, like Mac Stories, your site, my site, like all kind of came up within the same 12 to 18 months.
Yeah.
Of course, you were a fancy podcaster before I was.
Yeah, I started in like 2007. And the funny thing is, the way MacSparky started, if you want to hear the story, is I was contributing to podcasts like the old Mac Review Quickcast from Tim Verpoorten, may he rest. I was submitting like articles and recorded reviews to him, and I was doing some stuff online for other people. And they all kept saying, "Well, where do you want me to point this thing?" And then, like, some of the companies I did some reviews on wanted to point at my reviews, and I didn't have a place.
Mm-hmm.
And so I sat down and started looking at available URLs, and MacSparky was always kind of the one I wanted, and it was available. So I grabbed it. And it actually, the whole reason I started the website was because I was making stuff for podcasts, and I wanted to have a home on the internet for MacSparky.
Yeah, that's cool. It's always good to have your own corner of the internet, for sure.
Yeah, I have, with MacSparky's journey, I have just stumbled from one step to the next. None of this stuff has been intentional. It is crazy,
Well, like I said, we're going to hear more about what you're up to next week. So keep eyes peeled for that.
And next week, this show is going to publish on Monday. We've got some things going on where we can't get it out on Sunday, but it'll be up very early Monday. So sorry about the delay next week, but it's coming up Monday. So January 3rd. But today, we're going to talk about the state of Apple. One of the things we did when you joined the shows, we talked about things we wanted to cover. We did in the first year, I think quarterly, we hit the state of each Apple platform and gave it in-depth coverage. And this year, we got so busy with everything else going on that we didn't do that. And frankly, since we did all of the kind of in-depth stuff the first pass through, we thought we could kind of combine it all into one. And if everybody likes this, I think we might make it a yearly tradition for the last show of each year, just to cover the state of Apple on all of its various platforms and what it's up to. So we've got a good outline here. I'm really looking forward to getting through it today. For more power users, at the end of the show, we're going to be talking about the state of Mac power users and what we're up to, and nothing dramatic, but we have some exciting news. Hopefully for next year, we want to work on some stuff. We're going to cover that as well. And I think we should just get started.
Yeah. And since it's right in the name of the show and it's the centerpiece of my workflows and yours, let's start with the Mac.
Amen. Amen, man. The state of the Mac now compared to when we talked about it back in early 2020 is quite a bit different.
Oh yeah. It's really just been such an exciting time to be a Mac user. And you zoom out a little bit further, 2018, 17, 16, a lot of angst in the world of the Mac user, right? A very
it felt bleak.
Yeah, it felt forgotten and like it was playing not even second fiddle, but third, fourth, or fifth fiddle to these other platforms, and the hardware was a mess. And it's not all perfect, like we'll get into, but it really, the real reason I wanted to put this first is that I just really think Apple's got their eye on the ball in a way they haven't in a long time, and I'm really appreciative of that. As someone who has, built their entire workflow around this platform, to see it get the love and attention that I think it deserves from Apple, it just makes me very happy.
Yeah, and the thing is, Apple is not a PT boat; it's an aircraft carrier. It doesn't turn quickly, and we all were upset with the bad keyboards and kind of the lack of attention to the platform for several years. I think they probably got the message, long before we started seeing signs of them fixing it, because this stuff takes a while. But when we covered it the first time, we had a lot of open questions that have since been answered. And I guess let's just start by talking about the state of the Apple, or the state of the Mac, in terms of the silicon, because that's the biggest change since the last time we talked about it. Apple has finally, I guess I shouldn't say finally, but I'm going to say it anyway. They finally pulled the trigger and really took control of their own destiny with the silicon that goes into their Macs. I mean, a lot of us saw this coming for a long time as the iPhone and iPad chips were getting competitive with the MacBook Pro Intel chips. But there's a little part of you that always wondered. I mean, I thought, well, if they don't care that much about the platform, maybe it's easier just to keep making Intel Macs and just let it carry on its own momentum, because putting an Apple Silicon chip in a Mac was not a trivial amount of work, and it would have been easy for them to just stick with what they had. But they did it.
They totally did. And the more time goes by between this being announced and kind of where we are now, I think it's a much bigger deal than it feels like it is. Like, from a strategy perspective, from a historical perspective, from a sort of you've burned the bridge and can't go back perspective, like the switch from PowerPC to Intel made so much sense, and obviously was a huge deal and propelled the Mac for 15 years. But what they've done now, it's sort of like ringing a bell that can't unring in a way, and moving to their own systems on a chip designed by their people on top of the ARM platform. That's such a huge deal. No one else in the industry is really doing this. It really puts Apple into a class of its own, and that's a big deal. And doing it with the platform that we all love, and we were so afraid just a few years ago that Apple had kind of forgotten about, makes me so hopeful for its future.
Yeah, I mean, it's an affirmation of the platform. It's nothing less than that. And there was a part of me that wondered, are we going to get this? And, when you meet people from Apple, I mean, I've had the fortune to be able to go up there and hang out with some of the folks. Like when I was doing the iBooks author books, I would go up there and have lunch with some of them when I would release a new one. And there's so many people that work in Apple that love the Mac so much, I would probably argue, of all the people I met at Apple, most of them are Mac first people. So, inside there was always that love for it. But, it's a big company, and they're they're looking at spreadsheets like everybody else, and the iPhone makes so much money. It's like you could see the Mac kind of falling off the back of the truck, and it did not. And they have done this amazing Apple Silicon. Not only have they moved their silicon to the Mac, they have substantially improved the quality of the Macintosh platform in the process. I just got an email the other day from a listener who went from like a 7-year-old MacBook Pro to the new Apple Silicon. And he was commenting how it never gets warm. He's like, it just never gets hot no matter what I do. And that's kind of my experience too.
Yeah.
I talked in the Daniel Jalkut episode last month about when I play that dumb Star Wars game. It is Intel code running through CodeWeaver, which is Intel Mac OS, running through Rosetta, which gets it to Apple Silicon. It's running through 3 translation layers, and it runs fine, and it doesn't get hot. I mean, there is so much headroom now on the Mac. It is that cursed gift that gives you so much that it makes you want more.
Yeah, it's not just that it's faster and more efficient. It's like you said, all the quality of life stuff that I was like sort of hoping for, but I didn't want to count on. But yeah, it's these machines are just so fantastic. It's just been so exciting. Now, there are some things that we haven't seen yet. And so, we really are at the halfway point of this transition.
Yeah.
I believe, pretty strongly that if we were sitting down in 1 year from today, we'll be talking about the high-end iMac, the Apple Silicon Mac Pro, or whatever their professional desktop looks like. The story is close to being completed, but for most people who are buying notebooks and buying MacBook Airs and that sort of thing, the transition is here, and really it's just those of us on the high end are now kind of waiting for what's next.
Yeah, and we know so much more now. Like, I feel like this is a 3-chip system. I mean, we didn't know when we started. I mean, was it going to be like, were there going to be 10 Apple Silicon chips spread out the line? But they've got 1 chip for the MacBook Air, the low-end iMac, the low-end, Mac Mini. And then we've got this second chip, and we know what the second chip is now because it's in the MacBook Pro. And I think it would not be a shock, right, if we had a higher-end Mac Mini with that second-tier chip in it and a 27-inch iMac or something like a 27-inch, a bigger iMac with that MacBook Pro chip in it. So that will be the second tier. And then the third tier is going to be the Mac Pro, which we haven't seen yet. But, it's pretty easy to speculate. It's probably going to be 2 or 4 times more powerful than the one in the MacBook Pro. So I feel like, we know a lot more, and it's easy to kind of see where this is heading. The questions are like, where is the second tier Mac Mini? Because with the first tier, we got the Mac Mini at the same time we got the laptops. We didn't this year, so maybe there's a redesign, or I don't know, maybe there's a chip shortage. Who the heck knows? But we're going to get that. The other question is, where's the bigger iMac, whether they call iMac Pro or not, but it's going to have the laptop chips. And the third biggest question is, what in the heck are they going to do with the Mac Pro? And there's a lot of like interesting rumors circulating, but a year from now, when we do this show, we'll have answers. I feel we will. I think they're going to stick to it. They said 2 years. I think they're going to do it in 2 years.
Yeah, I think so. Even if some of that high end stuff is available for order and it ships in 23, I think we'll know what things are.
So I think the Mac, in hardware wise, is in great shape. We didn't even mention they fixed the keyboards. They've gone. I mean, the displays on the new MacBook Pros are amazing.
Mm-hmm.
All of that stuff is in great shape. There is one glaring exception in terms of the Mac hardware, and to me, that is the external display situation, which is kind of getting ridiculous at this point. There is no external display, and there is one, but you could buy a nice used car for the same cost of it. And it doesn't have a built-in camera. It doesn't have built-in speakers, and it gives you a bunch of video features that most people will never use. So there really is no external display for 95, 99% of their customers.
Then there's not a spectacular third-party option either. There are some decent ones. I'm gonna have a link in the show notes to our friend Casey. He has been going through this. He has moved to the laptop as a desktop lifestyle like you have, and he wrote this great post, sort of looking at some of the options for Mac users out there. And yeah, there's this huge hole in the market. Now, to play devil's advocate for a second, if I'm, the Mac, if I'm John Turnus, I'm wearing gray t-shirts and I'm ripped and I'm in charge of the Mac,
Okay.
I would shuffle those cards in the order he has. Okay, we got to do laptops, we got to do desktops, and yeah, the displays are bad, but we got to take care of these other Macs first. I get that ordering, but if we're a year from now and we still haven't seen something, it will be past the point of being ridiculous. So I am hopeful that in 22 we see Apple, bring out a display that is cut down from the Pro display in terms of features and specs, but makes it a lot more affordable. And I think, an external display that is, $2,000, which is still a lot of money and very expensive for an external display if you look at the wider PC market. But if you can do that and it's got like a nice Thunderbolt hub, the Thunderbolt display is like my all-time favorite Mac accessory because you can just plug everything into it, including Ethernet. It was just really great.
Yeah.
So having the display that can be your hub, and maybe it doesn't have ProMotion, that I think is actually kind of tricky over external Thunderbolt, but make a display for the Mac power user who's using a MacBook Pro at their desk all day, right? You've made one for video professionals, now make one for everybody else.
Yeah, and if the new one comes out and it does incorporate a lot of these amazing features in these panels and these laptops, that will explain to me why it took so long, because this is not easy what they're doing. But if it comes out and it's basically the same panel that you see in the current 24-inch iMac or the now shipping 27-inch iMac, which is you shouldn't buy because it's Intel, but if it's just kind of the same thing in an external case, then I'll be disappointed because I feel like they could have got that out a lot sooner. And so anyway, that is in terms of the state of hardware, they are hitting it on all cylinders except one, in my opinion. And the display thing is increasingly becoming a problem. I'm with you. I think this is the bottom of their priority list for the Mac, but Apple needs to walk and chew gum. And if you're going to be selling these multi-$1,000 MacBook Pros and you don't have a display to put on the market, and and they're just as aware as we are what kind of garbage is out there from third parties. It's not like there is a bespoke company making great displays that everybody can just go buy and be happy with.
Mm-hmm.
There just isn't. And I mean, I feel like this is just as a point of pride, wouldn't you want to have, if you were Apple, wouldn't you want to have people buying your displays? And anyway, I think we've said enough about it, but State of the Mac is great. Get us some displays, gang.
And Apple knows all of this, right? They are a giant customer of the Mac themselves, right?
Yeah.
All these hardware products, all these software products, they're all developed and worked on by people using the Mac. And so is Apple thrilled that it has a bunch of managers running around buying Pro displays for people in the work from home era? Like that is just not, it's not feasible, I don't think, even for Apple to buy a bunch of those from itself to hand out. So Apple knows this, and I'm hopeful that it's just been a matter of priority. But like you said, time is here.
This episode of the Mac Power Users is brought to you by 1Password, the world's most loved password manager. Just go to 1password.com/MPU to get 20% off your plan. 1Password is the easiest way to store and use strong passwords. With it, you can log into sites, fill in forms, and do all of that securely and with just one click. And all you have to remember is your 1Password. It actually gives you the ability to have convenience and security at the same time, and that's what makes it such an amazing product. The team at 1Password is solely dedicated to protecting your online privacy. They've added so many features to this application to help do that. One of them is Watchtower. We all do business with various online sites. How are we supposed to know when they encounter data breaches? I mean, we're not going to be studying the news every day to find out if the website we went on to, buy a new backpack has suddenly had a data breach. Well, 1Password does that for you, and they do that as part of the Watchtower service. So when you log into your 1Password account, Watchtower will tell you if any of the services you work with have had data breaches and you need to reset your password there. It's just so convenient. And if you'd like to learn more about data breaches at the 1Password blog over at onepassword.com/blog, they've got a whole article on how data breaches work and how you can stay safe online despite all of these data breaches. I mean, the fact is that the bad guys never sleep. They are always trying to find new ways to get your confidential information, your financial information, or anything they can use to take your money or your privacy. The 1Password team doesn't sleep either. They are constantly updating the application. This is so much more than just a password manager. Some of the things I do with 1Password, for instance, is I keep a confidential note with medical records in it for myself. So anytime I want to go to the doctor, I can look that stuff up. But it's not just available on my phone. It's behind that secure 1Password vault wall, and nobody else can see it. 1Password is an entire security system to help protect your online privacy, and you should check it out. Now, if you're going to sign up and you've got a family, I strongly recommend the family plan. That's what I do. And with the family plan, everybody in my family gets access to 1Password. They get the latest version of the apps, and we can share passwords between each other. During the holidays, my kids have got some time off school. We're all home together. We're doing a bunch of stuff together. And when we change the Netflix password or whatever, we can share that password across with each other. But my wife and I have a separate vault where we keep the banking information and things like that we don't need to share with the kids. You can do that too with a family plan. And you get 20% off if you go to onepassword.com/MPU. So what are you waiting for? Give your family security this holiday season. Go to onepassword.com/MPU. Sign up today and get that 20% off. And finally, since it's the last show of the year, I just want to thank 1Password. 1Password's the company that came in and stepped up and made that big contribution at the end to get the St. Jude fundraiser we did here at Relay over the hurdle, and we really appreciate it. These are great people, and they really care about your privacy. Go check them out right now, onepassword.com/MPU. All right, we talked about the Mac hardware. How about Mac software? How are they doing?
I think on the whole, Mac OS is actually in a pretty good place. You know, we're coming off a few years of pretty choppy waters where Mac OS killed off, Catalina killed off 32-bit applications. You've also seen this introduction and evolution of Apple's security model where the OS is now on a separate APFS like volume off to itself. And
I think that's good.
Yeah,
honestly.
that is good. I mean, and it means you can do things like quick delete a Mac like you do an iPhone, right? Where just after a few minutes, all your stuff's gone. That's fantastic. But there have been some growing pains with that. That's not completely over. There's still some kernel extension, driver kit type stuff that's still going on that affects a certain class of applications. But what I really worry about in terms of Mac software, even though I'm generally happy with where it is that Apple seems content to leave large parts of Mac OS and its bundled applications relatively stagnant. And I get with a yearly release cycle, which I still 10 years into it think is too fast for Mac OS. But I get that not every year, every project can be updated. And I know that things like Safari and Notes and Messages, those really popular applications need annual attention. But then you get into things like trying to change certain security aspects within system preferences, and the UI is so badly organized and crammed into like the system preferences application just needs to be burned down and rebuilt because they're doing so much in that confined space that just doesn't work.
Yeah, it needs a new paradigm, honestly. It's not logical as it is, and like where the tabs go. I mean, when we had Sal Segoyan this year, I had made the argument that some of the services stuff should have a separate menu, and he's like, look, there's only so much room in there. So,
yeah,
we were lucky to get a tab, but that is a constraint that is created by the creator. I mean, it's they could fix that. And I would love to see Apple use some of their design chops to just say, what if we had something completely different? I mean, the system preferences really dates back to the original Mac. If you look back on the very first Mac I ever used, and you look at the system preferences today, they aren't that different. And maybe it's time to redo that. Maybe it's time to come up with a different paradigm. And I believe they could do it. So, that's my challenge to you, Apple. Please, please just start
Yeah.
over with that.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, like system preferences being crowded or difficult to use in places is not necessarily the end of the world, but I use it as sort of a an example of what I mean by parts of the macOS interface and paradigm feel really stagnant. That if you go back and look at system preferences in the last 20 years or last 40 years, like, okay, these machines are so much more complicated and powerful now. We need new ways of managing them.
Yeah. And the compression that has occurred makes it too cryptic for non-power users. Like because of the holidays, I spent some time with my sister and her Mac, and she couldn't figure out how to change the default internet connection. Somehow hers got swapped out to Wi-Fi over Ethernet, and she, like everybody else, is working from home. And she's like, I'm plugging it in and it's still using Wi-Fi. I don't get it. And so, I took her through and showed her how to fix that. But Apple has the ability to decompress that, where normal people can find their way in and make those kinds of changes without having to call their nerdy brother. And this is really a UI problem. And this is not an underlying program. Like the mechanism to switch between Ethernet and Wi-Fi wasn't broken, and the software wasn't unable to make the switch. She just couldn't find the switch, which is a UI issue.
Yeah, for sure. I think in a similar way, the layering is also confusing in places like the menu bar, where we got Control Center, what with Big Sur on the Mac, and
Yeah.
it's kind of nice that all that stuff's combined. But like to see or change a Wi-Fi network is 2 or 3 clicks in, where it used to be one. And this is part of like a broader problem I have with Apple software in general. At least they're newer, the newer bits of Apple software and Apple user interface, where too many things are just hidden behind buttons or menus that don't necessarily have to be there. And Alan Dye has taken this over at Apple. I don't know much about Alan Dye, but from what I know from the work that has come out of his organization is that they are very happy to hide complexity behind multiple layers. And I mean, we talk about this in terms of the iPad all the time, right? How do you balance a product that on one hand it could be someone's first and only computer versus somebody like Federica who wants to run a business on it, and you have to find the balancing act in that complexity. And I feel like on the Mac they have in some areas moved too far into the direction of hiding things, putting things away, making things difficult to find. And I would like some of that to be revisited.
Yeah. And like the poster child of this is the proxy icon, which they just got rid of, really. And then this past year, if you click the right box or do the right terminal command, you can bring it back. But the proxy icon is one of my favorite features of the Mac. It's the thing that I miss when I'm on the iPad, the ability to right click the icon and do something, or drag a copy into an email or whatever. And they just kind of got rid of it. And there was a really good interview in the last month at Wallpaper magazine where they got access to the design team. It's the most in-depth discussion of the design team I've seen since Johnny Ive left. I mean, Johnny Ive was such a focal point that there were features that focused on him, but now he's not there. And somebody at Wallpaper got access to go and do an interview. And I thought it was a huge missed opportunity, because Alan Dye is quoted extensively in the article, but he never gets a chance to really explain his design philosophy. I mean, I'm not on the team of like, he's terrible because he's doing all this. I would just like to understand where he's coming from with it, and have him explain it. Or at least I think it'd be nice if there was, like, in our community, an open discussion of, what is appropriate on the Mac. And they definitely are kind of, I think they're leaning too hard into hiding power features, and of course I make a show called Mac Power User, so of course I think that, right? But I do think that things like the proxy icon can be accessible to a lot of people, and the answer is not to hide it, but to make it more usable and create a system where more people can take advantage of that. But that's where I would lean. So I think that's an issue with software on the Mac, and I think we've kind of covered it. But the other big thing right now on the Mac is this whole thing around how are we going to deal with the next computing, the platform application platform. And we've got, this competing battle. We mentioned it on the show numerous times over the course of the year. You've got AppKit, the historic model that developers create Mac apps in. You've got Catalyst, which is the thing, kind of the temporary fix Apple made where you can convert an iPad or even an iPhone app into a Mac app. And then they've got Swift UI, which for all intents and purposes appears to be the next big sexy thing to create your apps in. And it's not just for the Mac. It's the idea you can create apps in Swift UI and deploy them to iPhone, iPad, Mac, Apple Watch, and get them on all platforms with less work, which, I think is a very good intention. But on the Mac right now, we are in this weird phase where it's not clear what developers are supposed to be using. Consumers get upset if you use one over the other, but there's trade-offs on every one of these, so it's just, it's a difficult time right now for app developers.
Yeah, we spoke to Daniel about that as well as other guests throughout the year. And it just seems like Apple doesn't have a clear roadmap, maybe even internally, because even internally, different teams are doing different things, right? This year with Monterey, we saw Messages and Maps be sort of relaunched as Mac Catalyst versions of their iOS apps, but then Shortcuts is in Swift UI, and other parts are, new things are still in AppKit. So it really seems like at this point, maybe Apple's content with not having a clear roadmap, and maybe they say, hey, all three of these are options. They all have various pros and cons. Choose amongst yourselves. But I think the community is looking to Apple to help straighten some of this out and help simplify and set expectations about what will be here, not only today, but for years in the future.
Well, I think Apple wants to keep their options open as always. I think, however, that the message is clear that Swift UI is the future. And if there's a positive spin on all this, it's that they implemented Swift UI for the Mac. I mean, just like we were talking about earlier, they could have left the Mac in the dust and just kept on Intel chips. They could have done the same thing with Swift UI and just say, Mac will always use AppKit. All the cool new stuff we're going to do for Swift UI is only going to work on the iPad and iPhone, and the Mac's going to have to just linger on. But they didn't do that. They made Swift UI for the Mac too, and but we are in a very difficult transition. I mean, one of the stories of the last year was how Shortcuts for the Mac really had a difficult launch. It's still kind of suffering. I am working on that Shortcuts for the Mac field guide, gang. I haven't given up on it, but and the betas are getting better, so I'll get that done. So I haven't forgot about that. Don't email me. But the fact is. They built that on Swift UI, which clearly probably wasn't ready for prime time yet. And Swift UI probably got a lot better this year because of that. But the poor Shortcuts team, they were at the sharp end of the stick on that one. And maybe a year from now, we'll be able to report that Swift UI is getting a lot more user friendly and a lot of developers are feeling more comfortable using it. I think if we were to have this conversation 5 years from now, Swift UI will be the clear winner. And people will just be using Swift UI, but it's just not there yet. And just like we had that weird hardware transition where we knew they were fixing it, but it took time, I think we're kind of there with this. You call me a fanboy if you want, but I think they've got a solution, but I think it's going to take a lot more time.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And even looking at previous software transitions, everything is so much more complex now.
Yes, it's all connected to the internet and other hardware, and everything is hard now,
Yeah, absolutely. And so I don't really see this as a problem when it comes to Mac software, but it is a very interesting time that we're living in, and it's probably tough if you're a developer trying to pick the right starting point. And and mixing and matching these things the best that you can. And it probably means if you have a Mac app, you are rewriting or will be rewriting chunks of it for years to come as
Yeah.
things like Swift UI get better. But if we can get to the point where Apple seems where they want to go, is like you can have an application that runs on all of Apple's platforms and you're just tweaking it here and there. I mean, that is a vision worth fighting for. But one, I would note that no one has gotten to work, right? Android apps on Chrome OS or even Windows are weird. And Microsoft, of course, was unable to do it with things like UWP. And, they had this vision back when they had Windows Phone. Like, it's a very grand vision of the future of unifying your app platform. It's just going to take time to get there.
And I actually think Apple will get there. I know.
I mean, out of anyone, I think they're the strongest contender for sure.
Yeah. And they control the hardware. The difference is Windows didn't control the hardware. Microsoft didn't control the hardware.
Yeah.
So, but that's also something changing. But that would be on Windows power users. But it's interesting to see how hardware has changed on the Windows side. All right, so we're going to just use 2 segments to talk about the Mac because we're Mac power users. But as we wrap this segment up, what's needed? Where as we stand here, what do you think we need to do? What would you like to see progress on in the next year?
I mean, obviously, I want to see what pro hardware looks like, but on the software side in particular, I really want to see Apple continue to move the shortcuts ball forward. We mentioned the app itself being kind of a train wreck, but the shortcuts as a service where I can put them in the menu bar, I can interact with them with a bunch of our favorite third-party utilities like Better Touch Tool and Keyboard Maestro. The fact that I can get at shortcuts via the command line, all of that's fantastic. Like, I'm so glad to see how far Apple integrated shortcuts into Mac OS, and I want that to continue. I think that it really does open the door to automation for people who have always been intimidated by it. And shortcuts, while you can scale it up to be very complicated, doing simple automations to get started is really pretty easy. And I've always been impressed with that, even when it was workflows, before Apple bought them.
Sure.
That, hey, if I just want to do this and that and tie these 3 things together, it was pretty straightforward. That's really cool. It's something that Automator, I think, tried, but ultimately didn't succeed at. But I want Apple to continue to focus on really good shortcut integration with Mac OS, and I'm really excited about that future.
I feel like the Automator team, they found the solution with Automator, stackable, easily understandable automation steps. But I feel like Apple cut them off at the knees. I mean, if you look at Automator, it never got the access that Shortcuts has to do all the things that Shortcuts can. And if senior management at Apple had been behind automation back in the day when Automator started, I think we would have seen a very different curve. I think if Automator had love enough to get that kind of support from the beginning, it probably would have also showed up on the iPhone very early, as an existing technology. But the fact is, it lingered. And when the iPhone came up, whoever's in charge for whatever reason decided that automation wasn't the thing that was worth bothering with. And then, but the long game here is that Automator inspired the Shortcuts team. If you talk to them when they made Workflow, I mean, they were inspired by Automator. In fact, I know they've openly said that, and they built Automator, but with more tools on the phone, and then that got the attention of senior management at Apple. And now for whatever reason, we've got to a point where Apple, all the way to the top, believes in automation, and that is such a huge benefit. And you're right, we got hung up on the story that the Shortcuts launch wasn't great, but the big story is that Apple believes in automation, and I think continued investment in automation, like really put the gas down on Automator on both iPhone, iPad, and Mac. I mean, that could make it so much easier for so many people. I agree with you. That's something I'd really like to see get attention. Another thing I'd like to see get attention is, like you talked about earlier, the native apps kind of linger. You didn't mention Apple Mail, but that's bad. I mean, Apple Mail could be so much better. It's good at handling mail. It's secure. It does the basics, but it doesn't do any more And I feel like so many years have gone by. I just really wish that that team was given the money or the authority or whatever they're lacking
Yeah.
to make Mail a first class app. And it doesn't have to have every weird feature, but it has to get like the Apple Notes treatment where it becomes something that a lot of people are happy to use. And there aren't that many people that are happy to use Apple Mail now.
Yeah.
So I would like to see them like double down on some of that stuff. I think I've already mentioned displays. They need hardware displays for sure. And the other thing I'd like to see them do, and I think that this is a pipe dream, is I'd like them to get, now that they've got the Apple Silicon, I'd like to see them get more experimental with Mac hardware. Like what Apple did with the Surface Studio. It's like a big iMac that tilts down to a drafting table. I love that design. If it was a Mac, I would own one. And it's not, and I think that, the touchpad and some other things they've done in the past have kind of bitten them. And I feel like they're very adverse to taking risks with design. Like why not a touchscreen laptop? Why
Mm-hmm.
not, some of these other ideas? I mean, there is a lot of interesting things happening out there that Apple seems to ignore, at least in their product line. Maybe they're testing this stuff, but there's nothing wrong with coming out with a weird laptop that is touchscreen, and you don't even have to have it replace one of your existing ones. And I know it's really easy to say that. I don't have any appreciation for what goes into all that design work, but I mean, Apple is such a huge company. I would just like to see them make that a priority
Yeah.
of getting a little more experimental. And man, I'm just telling you guys, make an iMac that tilts like a Surface Studio, and then have it jump into like iPad mode when you tilt it down, like it's just a big 27-inch iPad. And I would, I'll be your customer number one. I'm there.
David's ready. That's what we're saying.
I'm ready. I got my money in my pocket. Well, I don't really, but I'll find it.
There you go.
I'll go bust open all my mattresses.
This episode of MPU is made possible by Squarespace, the all-in-one platform to build your online presence and run your business. From websites and online stores to marketing tools and analytics, Squarespace has you covered. I love that Squarespace combines cutting-edge design and world-class engineering. That means you can build a beautiful, modern website that looks great on any size device, can house all of your type of content, and you don't have to worry about patching or upgrading things in the middle of the night. They have great customer support if you need any help, and they let you quickly and easily grab a unique domain name. All of that can be handled in one place. Plus, Squarespace has everything you need for SEO and email marketing to get your ideas out there. In the new year, you may be looking to showcase your work with a portfolio or start writing a blog or publishing a podcast, promoting a business. Squarespace lets you do all of that very easily. What I love about Squarespace is that you can really change the nature of a site over time. So if you don't start with a blog, but you want to add one, it's really simple. You're not looking at a rebuild. You just turn on the blog module and you're set. So head to squarespace.com/MPU for a free trial with no credit card required. And when you're ready to launch, use the offer code MPU to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. That's squarespace.com/MPU. And when you decide to sign up, use the offer code MPU to get 10% off your first purchase and to show your support for the show. Our thanks to Squarespace for supporting Mac Power users and all of Relay FM.
Okay, so Apple also has this little product that doesn't really account for much called the iPhone, but we should at least mention it.
I guess we'll give it some time.
Yeah. Is it 50% of the income? It's always right around 50%, like it's 49 or 52. It's like right in the ballpark. But, a product that literally is like half of the income of a $1 trillion company. It is so massive. I don't even, every time they release a new iPhone and they talk about how many million units they sold, it's like the fact that they do that is almost like it's hard to conceive of making millions of anything that detailed and getting them out on time.
It's the product that it gets out the door in a very consistent fashion. I mean, even in 2020, being a little bit late with COVID, they were able to get it out, and they continue to push the ball forward. In a way, um, this is kind of the easiest section of this outline because, like, yeah, these phones are fantastic, but it's also kind of the hardest because I at least struggle to find like the low hanging fruit with the iPhone. Like from the hardware perspective, it's unbelievable. The cameras are so impressive, especially out of the 13 Pro and Pro Max. I mean, the imagery and the video you can capture with these devices, it really blows my mind. Even looking at photos from like an iPhone 10 or 10s not that long ago, they've made
Yeah.
such great strides. It's really hard to believe.
I mean, this is the first year because I have a fancy camera I use for all the video stuff I do at Max Sparky. And this is the first year I didn't pull it out at Christmas and take the family picture with it because the iPhone 13 Pro picture looks so good. It just wasn't worth the trouble. And I mean, the camera system, I mean, this happens every year, but I just can't get over how far that has come. I mean, just open your photos library and look at a picture you took with your camera 6 years ago.
Yeah.
With your phone 6 years ago and compare it. I mean, like, where are we going to be in another 6 years?
It's wild.
I heard from the inside one time that they have like hundreds of people that work full time on the camera system and camera software stack. Like, which is, I mean, when you think about it, like there's just a handful of people working on most apps at Apple. They've got this massive team. And I don't know if this is true or not. This isn't like super insider information, but I would totally believe that they have a couple hundred people working on it because that's what sells the iPhone every year is the camera upgrades.
Yeah, it's the reason people buy a new phone. And most people don't do it every year like we do and like a lot of MPU listeners do. But a lot of people, it's, they're going every 2, 3, 4 years. The camera may very well be the thing that pushes them over. But I think maybe just as important, I think Apple would say it's just as important, is that for the vast majority of iPhone users, it's their only camera. And so Apple feels an obligation and a responsibility to make it as good as possible because most people, it's the only camera that they're using to make those memories at the holidays and the birthday parties and everything else. And so I think they take it deadly seriously because of that.
Yeah. And, the flip side of that is the longevity of these things. At some family gatherings or the holidays, I saw some family members that had very old iPhones and they still work fine. And, these are people who aren't necessarily into the tech and they're perfectly happy to, they treat their iPhone like I treat my refrigerator. You use it until it breaks and you try and get it fixed. And, when you absolutely have no other choice, you replace it. And, that's okay too. And Apple has done a very good job of keeping older iPhones working. I mean, in comparison on the Android side, it's generally been my experience because they don't really make a lot of software updates for the, phones that are even just a couple years old. It's very, those Android phones get very old very quickly, whereas as an iPhone can run quite a long time.
It's really great. I mean, I've got a family member who is still on a 6S. And I actually handled that phone pretty recently. They had a question about an iMessage setting or something. Nothing related to performance whatsoever. Like, oh, hey, is there a way to change? I forget what it was. And so I was just like bebopping around the user interface. It's like, this still feels great. Like, it's not as quick to open to launch the camera as my phone is. Yeah, I'm sure the battery life on a 6S, I think it's still in the original battery. Probably not great. But it totally gets the job done. And I don't think this person in my family is looking at upgrading anytime soon. I think they're going to run it until eventually I tell them, hey, that phone is not going to get software updates anymore. And Apple should build their products like that. And I think to their credit, they've done it with the iPhone for a long time. We've also spoken about it, though, in terms of the Mac and the iPad, that Apple hardware it lasts a long time. And that's important from all sorts of perspectives. But with the iPhone in particular, it means that you can, it's a big purchase and it's an expensive device, but you're going to get years and years out of it.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to take 5 or 10 years to prove my hypothesis, but I think putting the Apple system on a chip in the Mac is going to mean that Macs run even longer than they did it before. And because that's what you see on the iPhone and the iPad. In fact, it's a problem on the iPad because people buy them. Was it on this show? I was talking about my friend who has the iPad 2.
Maybe. I think so.
I have too many podcasts. Well, I'll tell the story real quick. A friend of mine's wife has an iPad 2, and I was telling him to buy her an upgrade, and she was listening because I was on speakerphone. And she like jumped in. She's like, no, I love this iPad. I don't want a new one. I don't want to set up a new one. This is great. This is the iPad 2. This is the one that Steve Jobs was showing to Walter Isaacson when he was writing the biography of Steve Jobs, right? You know, what is it, like 10 years old now? I mean, and she loves it. She doesn't want a new one. It's crazy, right? Okay, so iPhone. What about the software side?
Yeah, this is where I said this is a tough a tough chapter in the show because iOS is so mature at this point. It's the low hanging fruit. I think is sort of a hard list to come by. I think that the core thing for me, I would like to see Apple address in iOS. I still think the share sheet is too uneven across applications, and I think it's still confusing to users that, okay, well, I have this like list of apps that scroll horizontally, but then I also have this list of actions that scrolls vertically, and sometimes things are in both places and sometimes they're not, and Mail doesn't have a share sheet. Like, I think a lot of that inter-app communication, look, a lot of that's up to third parties, a lot of that's out of Apple's control, but Apple, I think, should continue to model how that should work for third-party developers.
Yeah, and I think this is another one that would benefit from a decompression of the interface. Stop trying to put so much in so little space. You know, it's okay, and it doesn't. And you know, the same argument I made earlier about Apple Mail on the Mac applies equally on iPhone. And they haven't, you know, this isn't something where they've totally ignored their native apps. I mean, Apple Notes has gone through a transformation. I think Reminders is in the midst of a transformation, and it's becoming a very good app. But I would like to see them, you know, I mean, just get the whatever the roadblock is to doing that to all of the native Apple apps. I would like that to get removed, and that's something I would do. The other thing that really concerns me about the iPhone in terms of software is the general state of the App Store, and I feel like Apple has not at least publicly taken this serious enough. I mean, this past year, we saw multiple events where someone would make a successful app. I mean, it happened to our friend Dave Smith. When he made Widget Smith, there were like a bunch of copycat apps that used his basic icon and name. And they were, you know, trying to divert or defraud people to buy their, you know, crappy app instead of the thing he had spent months working on. And the only reason it seems like it got handled is because everybody raised such a stink about it publicly. But how many apps are in the App Store where they've got these copycats out there? And what's going on with search in the App Store? When I try to search for a specific name of an app, it doesn't even show up in the search results. But, you know, junk and garbage does instead. I feel like Apple took on an obligation when they said they're going to have this app store where they review apps and make sure it's a safe environment. And I feel like they're not living up to it, at least with, you know, all this copycat and garbage nonsense in the App Store.
Yeah, there's more to talk about at the App Store, but that's coming in a later section of the show.
Yeah.
What do you think, you know, thinking about the future of the iPhone? We just did this with the Mac. You know, what do you think, like, what do you think's on the horizon for this thing?
Well, I mean, Apple has had the benefit of a silicon lead the whole time. Like, you know, if you look at the Snapdragon and some of the competing chips on other platforms, they just don't hold a candle to what the iPhone does. And I think Apple, you know, I don't think that they can count on that lead forever. So I think they need to be planning for, you know, what are the other features they're going to bring and how are they going to take more advantage of it. One of the encouraging signs I've seen is speech to text dictation. I've been a fan of this since the Mac Power Users first started publishing. And I used to talk about Drag and Dictate and other options, but now Apple's built-in dictation is getting so good. And that's because of the silicone lead. And if you haven't tried it yet lately, the next time you want to send an email to somebody, hit that microphone button and just start talking and see how close it gets. So I want to see them do more with that. I want to see what they do with the cameras. I feel like we're running into physics with with the existing width of phones. I don't think they're going to make, how much thinner can the iPhone get without turning the camera into a piece of garbage? And, there's all these periscope technologies now where you can put the sensor like lower in the phone and then essentially use a periscope to get more physical distance between the lens and the sensor. But I want to see them. I want to see them head in that direction because I want the camera system to get even better at the same time that the phones continue to get refined. And I like these big bumps on the phones. I feel like in 10 years, we're going to look back at that and laugh. I feel like they have to solve that problem or eventually a phone's going to be ridiculous. It's going to have like it's going to be phone's going to be paper thin and it's going to have a 1-inch lump on the end. I mean, that's not going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, even this year in particular, the 13 Pro and Pro Max, I mean, this camera bump is wild. It is enormous. I mean, to the extent that the Apple leather case itself has a bump on it to accommodate the camera bump. It's truly wild.
And you also see these technologies in labs where they've got lens arrays, like 20 lenses, and they're doing crazy things with that amount of data. I mean, I don't know. Do we get to the point where the entire back of the iPhone is a lens? I don't know what is going on, but I feel like, I'd like to see them evolve because I feel like they're getting to the limit of what they're doing with the existing camera technology. And I know there are rumors now that the next iPhone is going to have a periscope in it. And, I don't know if it's going to happen that soon, but I feel like there's got to be something better than these bumps. And also, I mean, if you have a periscope lens system or something like that, where you could put even more distance, you could actually really start cranking down the aperture or opening the aperture wider. And there's a lot you could do if you had a little more space in there. So we'll see what happens with that. And I know you have concerns about the future of the Lightning port.
Just a lot of questions. I mean, the rumors are that they're going to ditch it and go to a portless phone. I think it's something Apple thinks is a good idea. I'm not sure in the real world that it actually is. I just, as we're recording this, put up a video today where I was checking out wireless CarPlay. I was like, yeah, wired CarPlay is still better in my experience. Having that cable available to you when you can't wireless charge or you don't want to because you need, maximum speed or something like that. There's just a lot that a port offers. And I think it would be, if they do it, it's a really bold move. And to do that bold of a move on their biggest, most important product, talk about like feedback they're going to get. I mean, do you remember all the heartache that we all went through with the 30 pin to Lightning? And the iPhone was a mere baby product compared to what it is now. And so I don't know what comes of that, even going to USB-C, which I know I would like and a lot of sort of nerdier types would like. Even that brings real problems for a lot of people. So I don't know what happens. I'm fascinated to follow it, but I feel like Lightning is not going to be on the phone in 10 years, one way or the other.
Yeah. And so if you're in charge of Apple, what do you do? What's your plan?
I think I'm trying to like merge me and like what I think Apple would on the whole would do.
Don't do that. I'm giving you Tim's job.
Okay. Well, if it were me, I would put USB-C on it.
Me too. I just say, let's just rip the Band-Aid off, put USB-C and keep it on.
Yeah.
And, and be done.
Yeah. And then whatever comes after USB-C, which by the way, Apple helped invent, they were on the, on the committee that crafted USB-C itself. And they did it with that MacBook in mind, that one port MacBook in 2015. And it's in many ways very complementary to Lightning. It's small. It's actually a little bit bigger than Lightning, but it is small. It's reversible, but you can put tons of power and data through it. And that's something the phone would benefit from, right? I mean, How many people have we spoken to on this show and in the forums and on Twitter and everywhere else who are checking things out like ProRes video is like, oh, but it's 2 hours to copy it to my laptop because Lightning is really slow and AirDrop is unreliable. It's like, you know what solves both of those things? A USB-C
cable.
port.
Yeah. Yeah, a cable.
You know,
well, it's like if I had the time, normally when I switch to USB-C, I'd say I think the magnetic charging, wireless data transfer, all that is good stuff. Let's put money into that. Let's put money into making sure that the USB-C port is hardened and that's never a problem if water gets into it. Let's protect the phone. But I would the idea of getting rid of the port, I would just take off the whiteboard. I just don't see a good reason for it. I mean, the copper connection will always be faster than the wireless. If you say, well, the wireless is going to be so fast in 5 years, but you know what's going to be faster in 5 years? Whatever you can do over a copper port. It's, and and there's always going to be people that need that. And what is the harm? I just don't understand what the harm is in having a little tiny port on the bottom of the phone.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I mean, it seems to me, I know this is like a rumor that they're going to get rid of it. Maybe they will, but I'm like you. I have a real hard time understanding what the benefit is. All it's going to do is just limit my options.
Mm-hmm.
And like you, I have CarPlay too. And I watched your video and I'm like, wow, I do not want wireless CarPlay because my wired CarPlay is great. And it's in the glove. It's in the little, boot thing under your right arm. So I put the phone in there. I'm never tempted to look at my phone anyway because I can't even see it when I'm driving.
Yeah.
And it's perfect,
Yeah, it's a wild thing to think about. Out of like all hardware discussions about like future Apple gear, this is perhaps the most interesting to me. Like, don't get me wrong, I'm all about an Apple Silicon like Pro desktop. I'm very excited about that. But in terms of like analysis and like there's so many interesting things to consider, the iPhone port, top of the list.
All right. So now I'm demoting you. You just lost your job. What do you think they're going to do?
I think they're going to pursue this magnetic clip-on type thing. I think MagSafe on the phone is like stage 1 of this, and maybe they come up with a way where they can do data through there as well. Look at the iMac with the Ethernet on the power brick, right? They have pins in there to pass the Ethernet to the machine, where they can get rid of the port, but they still have a way to move data that's not purely wireless. I don't know if that's what they would ship, but I would bet money they're interested in that and are exploring it.
Yeah, I'm in similar vein. I feel like they're going to keep Lightning until there's no port. I don't think USB-C is ever going to make it to the phone. And I hope desperately that I'm wrong. Because they took such a shellacking when the 30-pin port was terrible. I mean, I don't know if if there's anybody listening that never used that 30-pin port, everything about it was worse than Lightning. And anyway, it was just terrible. And people still went crazy when they got rid of that. Can you imagine if they have to get rid of their Lightning cables to go to USB-C?
Yeah.
It's gonna be rough.
And if they do that resets the clock on anything else.
Yeah. So that's why I feel like they're going to just keep it Lightning. If they really are planning to get rid of that port, they're going to keep Lightning until they do.
Yep, I think so.
This episode of the Mac Power Users is brought to you by the Tech Savvy Lawyer Podcast, helping lawyers with their tech questions. You can check it out right now. Just go to Tech Savvy Lawyer Podcast anywhere that you find podcasts. The Mac Power Users is great for everyone in any profession using a Mac, but for those in the legal profession, why not find a podcast that is specifically aimed at you? Whether you are a lawyer or law support focused on everything Mac, the Tech Savvy Lawyer Podcast is all about how Macs, and yes, even Windows, are used by lawyers. The host, Michael D.J. Eisenberg, is the Tech Savvy Lawyer over at the Tech Savvy Lawyer page, and he interviews judges, lawyers, software developers, SEO specialists, and more, all about how to use technology in the practice of law. And I'll tell you, having been in the law racket for a few years, a lot of lawyers and legal professionals are not awake on tech issues, and it really costs them. People in the legal profession that can get ahead of the game on tech are going to get ahead in general. I truly believe that. And Michael does a great job talking about how lawyers and others in the legal profession can use technology to improve the practice of law. I've actually been a guest on the show twice. The most recent episode, episode 36, is about knowing the importance of your online presence. I know a lot of lawyers are nervous about doing things online. It just seems a little skeevy. You've got to be able to do it professionally. Well, this episode is for you. If you have those questions, the interview is with Gordon Van Wetchel, who is the founder at the Alchemy Consulting Group, and he's giving advice to people for small and medium-sized businesses and professional practices how to develop a marketing and business growth plan that's not creepy. You can handle your online presence, and you should be thinking about it now, and this episode is for you. The Tech Savvy Lawyer podcast is an excellent service for legal professionals and legal-related folks. You can join Mike on this bi-weekly podcast at Apple Podcasts, Amazon Podcasts, Libsyn, and wherever you get your podcast downloads. So why not spend some time these holidays catching up on the 36 episodes published so far? Once again, search for the Tech Savvy Lawyer wherever you get your podcasts. And our thanks to the Tech Savvy Lawyer podcast for the support of the Mac Power users and all of Relay FM.
All right, so moving on from the iPhone, let's talk about the iPad, which, in past years, maybe these things would have been collapsed into one topic, but with iPad OS and this whole wide range of iPad hardware, they really stand apart now. So how do you think the iPad did this year?
Well, I have a weird vantage point of the iPad this year because 2021 was the year that my relationship with the iPad changed. The iPad and I were pretty serious dating, and now we just became casual friends this year. And it was like a really good move. We are such better friends than we were dating. I know this is getting weird, right? I don't know.
Out.
I got to stop. But no, seriously, I was always trying to use the iPad as a laptop replacement and do everything with it. I wrote the iPad at Work book. I feel like I was one of the first people to try and work exclusively on an iPad.
Yeah.
And this was back when I had to load iTunes to get my documents transferred over. So it was rough, But every year I had these false hopes about how Apple was going to fix all of these issues to make it like a Mac. And then I kind of had a moment of clarity after WWDC this year that Apple, I should stop trying to think about the iPad in terms of what it could be and just treat it in terms of what it is.
Mm-hmm.
And when they put the M1 Silicon in the iPad Pro, which was before WWDC, I thought, this is it. This is the year. They're pulling all the stops out, and the iPad is going to get all the multiple channel audio and all the things that were holding me up from using it for a bunch of stuff on the road. And then they addressed none of that in WWDC. They made some improvements to the operating system, but they fundamentally kept it as what it is, something halfway between an iPhone and a Mac. And then I was, at the same time I was mulling all that over, I was having dinner with my children who both have iPad Airs, and they're both in college. And they were both just talking about how much they love their iPads. They both bring iPads to class with them. They use Notability or GoodNotes. They're in different camps on that one with the pencil to take notes in class. And they just love everything about the iPad. I was listening to them talk about it, and they were only using kind of the vanilla features that an iPad is good at. And that's what made them love the device so much. And I thought, you know what? Maybe I need to be more like them and stop trying to make the iPad do things that Apple doesn't even care about it doing. So that was my big change this year with the iPad. So I still love it now. I think I love it more. But I'm not if I need to make a podcast, I'm going to do it on a Mac. If I'm going to do heavy file management, I'm going to do it on a Mac. I'm no longer trying to swim against the current on some of these things that it's just not good at.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. My journey with it has been very similar. Mine was really because of the iPad mini, where things like multitasking, they're fine, but it's not fantastic. It's that smaller screen focuses the iPad into kind of what it started out being, which is this device turns into the app that you're using. And as such, I don't even look at my iPad as a device really that I want to do work on anymore. I tried it for a long time, and it's definitely not that it's not that I can't do it necessarily. Some things are that way, like, podcast production stuff, doable on an iPad, but not very pleasant. And it is something that the new MacBook Pro is like solved for me. Like, I have this fantastic laptop now, and the iPad is now sort of free to be less of a computer in my life, and
Yeah,
I'm fine with that.
I get it. And the Mac does now have a much longer battery life, and it stays cooler, and like a lot of the advantages that were historically on the iPad versus the Mac have now been removed because they've got the same chip in both of them, and you've got those advantages across the board. I just to be clear, I do a lot of work on my iPad still. It's just like there's certain work I don't even try anymore, and I've talked about in the show how when my wife wants to go to Disneyland, I'll go and work for 4 hours in Galaxy's Edge. That's all done on an iPad Pro. I'm not going to bring my multi-$1,000 laptop to Disneyland. And so I just bring the iPad Pro and I work on MindNode and email and planning and writing documents. There's tons of things I can do great on the iPad. But like I said, anytime I hit friction with it, if there's not an easy answer, like if solving the problem requires me to spin up an external server or add a specialized piece of hardware, I'm just not going there, Or if it requires me to do 7 taps where I can do it with 1 on the Mac, I'm just saying, okay, we're friends now. We're not dating anymore. We're friends. We're really good friends.
I'm so confused by this analogy.
I know. I don't know how I got here, guys. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. I'm punchy. It's the end of the year.
Yeah.
Let's just say that.
Well, let's talk about the hardware line, because the iPad line is really compelling. And I think they have the best lineup that we've seen maybe ever in the iPad.
Yeah, this is Apple at its best. They've got everything covered. Like you can get, what's the low end? Is it $330 now? I forgot what the low end iPad is, but it's like a remarkable piece of technology for under $400.
Yeah.
That you can do a ton of work or play on. I mean, and then it goes all the way up to the big boy iPad Pro, which you can spec up to like $2,000 and have something that does, with this amazing screen and an M1 chip that can go so much further.
Yeah, the span is really, really impressive, and that $329 iPad is pretty great. I mean, I think it's a great value. If you're a school, it's even less expensive. I think currently at the end of 2021, the only iPad that sort of sticks out to me a little bit is the iPad Air. It got that redesign. It looks like the iPad Pro, but it hasn't been updated since then. So it's, I bet it'll get updated in the spring.
Yeah. I think it's on track though. I don't feel like it's like terrible. It's just, it's the older one right now, but pretty soon it'll be the newer one.
Yep. The iPad Pro with the M1 is astounding hardware. We'll talk about the software in a second. But boy, the winner for me this year, and I mean, it's seriously my favorite iPad I've ever had is this new iPad Mini. I really love it.
It was like the last penny to drop in this line, right? It's got the new design, and it's like, this is why the line is like top to bottom stellar. You cannot buy a bad iPad at this point. You go to an Apple store, you've got different feature sets and different costs, but whichever one you pick is going to be a great value for the money, in my opinion.
Totally agree.
Software?
Yeah.
Do we go there?
I mean, I'm glad they're calling it iPad OS. It does have a distinct identity now. The thing that it's like been the struggle for the iPad really from the beginning is, and this is how like Steve Jobs sort of pitched the original iPad, is like, how do you make something better than a smartphone at these sorts of things and better than a laptop at these other sorts of things? And the iPad is still very much kind of caught in between those two guideposts. And if you look at that $329 plain iPad and a $2,000 iPad Pro with an M1, Yeah, the hardware is way better, and you get access to like the cool keyboard and a better Apple Pencil. But the software experience between them is the same. And that's true for the Mac as well. But the difference is the Mac has way more escape valves for power users, where really the way I think about it in the Mac is a MacBook Air can do everything my Mac Pro can. And it may just be that the users are different, right? But if you're a power user on an iPad, you're limited by the decisions that have been made for that plain iPad or the iPad mini.
Yeah.
And it feels, for so long I thought Apple was really gonna drastically change it. And like I should say, the multitasking, I feel like they finally got in a pretty good place. I still think it's maybe like just put Windows on it and be simpler in some ways, but it is a lot better than it's ever been. The window management's a lot better than it's ever been. Some of it's not great, like the file management and some other things, but Apple seems like either they're unwilling to really make it much more computer like than it is, or they're doing so but at such a glacial pace that it's hard to see where they're going. And I don't know which of those is true, but I've kind of begun to just accept that the iPad is never going to be this like touchscreen computer that maybe we hoped it could have been 5 years ago.
Yeah. Liza Doolittle had that song, Show Me. Don't give me words, show me.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is they never gave us the words, right?
Yeah.
I feel like all of us have projected a wish cast that the iPad was inevitably going to have the same feature set as the Mac or do the things the Mac does in addition to all the cool stuff it does as an iPad. And I really I had this revelation this year. That is not Apple's intention at all.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they'll never say publicly because, they just don't do that stuff. But I mean, their actions have been really clear. They want to make a really cool iPad experience. They don't want to make it into a Mac replacement. And I don't think they're ever going to do that. What I would like them to do, however, is continue to make iPad-specific progress. And to me, the best example of this is the way they implemented the mouse on the iPad. I mean, I could argue with you that the mouse implementation on the iPad is better than it is on the Mac because the way the pointer snaps to a button and the way the cursor is context sensitive to what it's sitting over. And like, there's a lot of cool stuff. I know that's on the Mac too, don't write me, but it's better on the iPad the way they did it. And I feel like that was a very intentional, plotting way to get pointer support on the iPad that everybody likes. I mean, nobody was complaining about that when they released it because they did such a good job. And I'd like to see them continue to do that. And maybe, let's look at some of the use cases that a lot of people have and see if you can write software around that. I mean, the one podcasters always complain about, because if you're listening to the show, I'll give you a secret. We're recording it twice, we're recording it in Zoom and we're recording it locally on our Mac. So we've got an audio feed coming into our Macs that we want to record in two places. That's not possible on an iPad.
Nope.
iPad only takes the audio feed one place, does one thing with it. And if Apple would look at some of those problems, like that pro user group, give them iPads and find out where their rough spots are. I'd like to see them attack those as well.
Yeah.
And narrow the gap a little bit. But I've come to acceptance, and maybe I'll be shocked and they'll spin around and do something amazing. But I feel like they're going to treat the iPad as an iPad forever, or at least the foreseeable future. And either you're okay with that, or you shouldn't have an iPad.
I think there's room for Apple to lead by example here, especially when it comes to some software titles. Like, if Apple wants this to be more of a creative tool, and like you said, I'm not convinced they do. I think they say they do, but I'm not convinced of it. Then why aren't Apple's projects like Logic or Final Cut there? Right? Apple has ceded the high ground of the app market to third parties on the iPad, and that's given us some amazing titles, right? I mean, there's really some amazing iPad software out there for video and audio work. But Apple has these world-class programs on the Mac. I use both of them every week, Final Cut and Logic, and they haven't brought them to the iPad. And
It's their platform.
yeah.
You know?
And you may think, in the past I would have said, well, maybe the power's not there. Okay, well, there's an M1 in the iPad Pro. Oh, well, you need input devices. You have a keyboard and a trackpad and an Apple Pencil. You have more input devices than you have on the Mac. I don't know why they haven't done it, and maybe they will. And honestly, I hope they do, because I think the power user market for the iPad feels abandoned. And I think, especially in the creative industries, like if Apple wants to regain any of that, they need to show by example. They need to put their programs there as true, like, world class examples of what an iPad is capable of.
Yeah. And, make the iPad more iPad-y, I mean, take advantage of that pencil even more. And, it's a computer on a piece of glass, which is an amazing thing.
Oh, yeah.
And so just think about that as you're making changes to it. And I really do kind of blame my own, projections onto what I wanted the iPad to become for a lot of my frustration with the device over the years, because I love it so much at the same time that I wanted to do things that the Mac does just as easily. But then you got to stop to think about, well, all the good things that the iPad does that the Mac can't do easily. I read a lot of PDFs and mark them up on the iPad. I love that experience on the iPad. If I had to do it on the Mac, I'd be sad because they wouldn't be as good or as fast,
Mm-hmm.
So you just got to kind of get over it. And I have to really stop trying to think about the iPad as what it is in my own mind's eye, and instead look at it for what it is.
Yeah. I think a lot of us are kind of there now for a bunch of different reasons.
Yeah. But in terms of the overall state of the iPad, it's excellent hardware, an excellent whole hardware stack, really.
Mm-hmm.
And all the accessories are there. They've got everything you need. The software, even like using this new paradigm of making the iPad more iPad-y, it doesn't do a good job of playing to projections or external displays. And some of the handwriting stuff they made so much progress on, it could still get better in places. I was trying to use handwriting recognition the other day and found some areas. I mean, they could double down on what they're doing and make it better. And I hope they do. And hardware-wise, this on the iPad, before I sign off on this is one where thinner and lighter is much better. Like recently I did that
than the
test.
Mac, you mean? Like,
yeah, exactly. I mean, thinner and lighter on the Mac, I'm not so excited about, but on the iPad, like I recently did a test with a Remarkable 2, which is not an iPad competitor. It's a pad and paper competitor, really. But it was much thinner and lighter than an iPad, and holding it made me realize that, oh yeah, the iPad could be better if it was thinner and lighter. So this is one where I'd like to see them lean into that. And I know, again, that the laws of physics, yada, yada, but this is an area that they could improve,
So let's talk about some of the small things Apple makes. I wanted to start with the Apple Watch. So this year we got the Series 7, which is slightly redesigned, but I mean, we don't talk about rumors a lot on NPU, but we all read the rumors about the flat-sided Apple Watch Series 7 that a lot of people reported was coming, that I thought looked pretty cool. Didn't get it. We got a refinement of the shape that we've always had. Kind of maybe a smaller update year for the Apple Watch hardware. What do you think?
Well, I got the update this year. I had taken a year off, and it's a refinement, but it's a bigger screen. I feel like it's a bigger update than people give it credit for. Coming off the 2-year-old version, the always-on display is way brighter now. And I was actually relieved because the renders of the supposed flat-sided Apple Watch I didn't think were very attractive. I really like the flat sides on the iPad and the iPhone, but I don't think I would have wanted a box on my wrist. And that's kind of what it felt like. I mean, if anything, I find some of the third-party round digital watches to be interesting. But either way, I think overall, I'm generally happy with the design of the Series 7, and I think this, the Apple Watch is one that they haven't iterated a lot on the overall design because they've got such a small space to work with, and they've got debt with these band compatibility. And I'd be one of those people that'd be flipping out if I lost band compatibility, because I have never been a fashion person. Like, it's kind of scary how unfashionable I am. but
Hmm.
but for some reason, these Apple Watches and the fact that you can buy them on Amazon for like $5 or $10, I have way too many watch bands. And like today I'm wearing a red one because, it's holidays, right? Still got my Christmas watch band on. It's like every morning I literally look at what color my shirt is, or if I'm, whatever. I find lots of reasons to change my watch bands. So uh, I think I kind of went down a rabbit hole there. Yeah, it's good. Series 7. Yeah. Okay. Thumbs up.
Well, no, no. I mean, I think the band compatibility is a huge thing. I think
Yeah.
I think a lot of people would be really unhappy if that got messed up. And I was excited 2, 3, 4 years in where they had continued to do this, but now we're on Series 7. It's like, are you going to do it forever? Like, is there a point where they break compatibility? I don't know, because they've had 2 case size changes as well, and they've managed to keep these compatible. I think clearly it's at the top of their list, or towards the top of the list when they consider a redesign.
Well, I mean, they're selling. I mean, I buy the cheap ones, but I've got a few of the expensive ones too over the years. I mean, if you're at Apple, I mean, do you want to walk into that mess of telling people all their watch bands don't work anymore?
Ooh, I don't.
Well, let me give you Tim's job again for a minute. I'm not promising I'm going to let you keep it, but is the hardware design of the Apple Watch where it should be, or do you do something drastically different? Like, do you make it round, or I mean, do you think it needs to be something different than what it is currently, like a rounded rectangle?
I don't think it does. I actually, while I think the rounded watches look nice, like on in the Samsung corners of the world,
Yeah,
I have used a couple of them over the years on and off, just trying things out. And there are some real trade offs you make with that. The biggest one is you do a lot more scrolling to read content on the screen because it's going to get cut
yeah,
off as you move up and down. And
yeah. There's a reason computer screens are square.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Now, what I would like for them to do is just like on the iPad, I think thinner and lighter is a good thing when it comes to the Apple Watch. And I would like to see them be able to slim it down. In fact, over the years, it's actually gotten thicker as they've added things like additional health sensors and cellular, and all those things are great. And I'm glad they're all in there. I don't want them to take them away, but I do hope they can find a way to slim it down so it's a little bit closer to the wrist, a little bit lighter, and a little bit less noticeable when when you're wearing things like long sleeves or a jacket. I feel like my Apple Watch hangs up on a jacket way easier than maybe a more traditional watch does. And I think a lot of that comes
Yeah,
down to the thickness.
yeah. I'm with you. I like round watch faces, but I'm starting to kind of come to peace with the fact that a digital watch needs a digital watch face,
Yeah,
and the square makes so much more sense. You
yeah.
can get so much more information on the
You
screen.
know, I still want an Apple Watch with no screen, though. I still really want them to explore an area of an actual like fitness focused product that doesn't have the watch OS stuff, where it tracks all my fitness and it communicates to my iPhone, but without this big colorful screen, without notifications, without apps.
It's
Because,
like a bracelet.
yeah,
Yeah.
because really, if I distill like what I really, really want is to be able to wear the watch that I want on my left wrist, and on my right wrist, wear a fitness band that talks to Apple Health. And
Yeah. So you're looking at the band more as a health device than a timepiece.
yeah, I mean, that's really how I think of the Apple Watch. And the times, I mean, I still to this day have these seasons where I'll just go a couple weeks without wearing it because I just don't want to. And the fitness stuff is what I find myself missing, not a lot of the watch OS sort of smartwatch stuff. Those things are valuable, but less valuable to me than the fitness tracking.
Yeah, I use the watch. I am a huge fan, and I wear it every day. And I do a lot of the data stuff on it. Like timers for me is probably the most frequently used complication. And I run timers for everything because I have one of those brains that will get distracted and lose track of time very easily. And like when I'm doing my time blocks, I'm like, okay, I got 45 minutes to work on this thing. I'll just set a watch timer on my wrist, and I know people will get like kitchen timers or a Pomodoro actual tomato timer and put it on their desk. But
Hmm.
I just like having it on my wrist, and it's so easy to set them. And if you set it as a complication, um, but I do stuff like that all the time. So I'm really using the watch deeply. But you do raise an interesting issue, is like where the iPad from top to bottom has every device it needs at every price point. I feel like the Apple Watch ecosystem could grow. I mean,
Oh
you
yeah.
talked about like a faceless kind of activity tracker wristband thing. That's one thing they could do. Another one that's frequently rumored is kind of like the rugged Apple Watch, one that comes in a case that's kind of more like a G-Shock style Apple Watch. Do you think we'll get that? And what do you think about something like that?
I mean, as someone who's smashed an Apple Watch in a bike accident, I'm all for a ruggedized watch if it looks good. And I like G-Shocks. Like, in fact, I'm wearing a G-Shock today, and I really like that sort of look. But you're right. It's almost as if Apple has like made a statement by not expanding the Apple Watch line.
Yeah. Well, at the beginning, legendary. They'd made the $20,000 gold Apple Watch,
Oh
and I
yeah,
feel like,
everyone's
and
favorite.
that, yeah, everybody made fun of them. And then like, there's the guy that bought four of them for each of his dog's paws, and like there's the whole like it became a spectacle, and I think they quickly got away from that. And they have experimented with materials, but people wear watches in different contexts, and I think if you were a contractor or something, you would want to have one. I mean, that there's a lot of stuff that an Apple Watch can give you that would be useful, but you don't want to be swinging a hammer or like I remember my wife gave me a nice watch once, and then I was putting roofing on my parents' house, and I scratched the crystal on roofing material, and I felt like such a dummy for wearing the watch at all that day.
Yeah.
It's like, but so I think there's a market there for people who want Apple Watches, but something that is more rugged, and I would love to see them like laterally go there.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think they can. It is very interesting how constrained they've kept it. I mean, even at this point in its life, I mean, we're said 7 generations in. At this point, we had different iPhone sizes and we had different iPad models, and the Mac was in a bunch of different shapes. The watch really
Yeah,
kind of stands alone in this way.
yeah. So what would you do? So we got rugged, we got fitness tracker wristband, we got standard, which is the Series 7 right now, and we've got kind of like the SE, which is kind of the low end, you know, keep track of my kids watch.
Yeah, low end, but shockingly too expensive.
Yeah, that is an issue, I think. I mean, the Series three's existence is a problem with the state of the Apple Watch
Yeah.
because developers are now screwed for the next 4 years,
Mm-hmm.
Um, but is there any other market you think they're missing?
I mean, I think the ones we've talked about hit the high points for me. Maybe there's room for a more a more dedicated child version. I mean, the SE is fine, but it's still like pretty big. Like, I'm not gonna.
Yeah.
None of my kids are going to be getting one anytime soon. But if I were, even the small SE is kind of big, and so maybe something that's a little more. Maybe the ruggedized version kind of fixes that too. I don't know. But when I think about like slapping a watch on a kid, it's like the SE. Like, I'm not sure that's the right choice.
If I was in Tim's chair, I think something I would want to experiment with, not necessarily release, but just to see how it worked, would be what if we took all the health sensors out and just made the thinnest possible Apple Watch that could last a day?
Hmm.
And because there's some people that want it for time and notifications, and they don't care about the health stuff. And I know it's not me and it's not you, but there are people there that would, they would like something very elegant and small and thinner. And I'd be curious to see what they could do. And you can't make it round because then you're going to mess over all of your developers because then they're going to have a separate user interface. But what if you just made something that was like not as fully featured, but
Yeah.
the focus was like you can call it Apple Watch Air or something like that, where you're not getting everything, but you're getting something that really is thin on your wrist. I think there's a market for that.
Yeah, I think there is. Again, it's just about giving people options for what they want and what fits best in their life, right? There are people who would want
Yeah.
just a fitness tracker, there are people who don't want any of it. And so
Yeah, but I mean,
why
yeah.
why not spread out if you can do so reasonably?
I feel like they're not going to do that though, because they feel like they get such a mandate with the health thing that
Oh
I think
yeah,
feel like they're never going to make one without the health.
I don't
I
think
mean,
so either.
a personal friend of mine is one of those guys that has the story where the Apple Watch saved his life. I mean, he's just sitting around at his house and his watch is telling him your heart is not right. There's something going on. And he goes to the doctor and he's got a zipper like within a day or two. I mean, it like he had no idea that he was having heart problems. And I'm, he's convinced that if he hadn't gone to the doctor, he would have dropped dead in the next week,
Gosh.
and this is a guy I've known for 40 years. I feel like there's so many people that are getting that experience. I think, and Apple sees those stories. I feel like they're never going to pull the health sensors out of the watches. But anyway, it'd be curious to see if they made a super thin and light one.
Mm-hmm. And it may be that they've had to work so hard at getting the Apple Watch to where you can really get all day battery life out of it, and that it's waterproof and you have
Yeah.
cell service if you want it. That only now maybe do they feel comfortable in trying to expand the line in different directions. I mean, it's taken the Apple Watch hardware and software, honestly, longer to get good than I think any other Apple product we've seen in a long time. Right? Like the iPad was pretty dang good from day one. The iPhone, year 2 or 3, pretty dang good. The watch has taken longer, I think, because it's so constrained. It's on your wrist. It's tiny. You have to be able to wear it. It has to look nice. That maybe it's taken longer for them to get to stable ground, and maybe they're there now, and maybe we'll start to see some of this. I certainly hope so.
Yeah. And I would also argue that one of the problems with the watch is when they released it, they didn't know what good was.
Oh,
I
yeah.
mean, of all the things they've released, they weren't sure what we were going to do with it and what people were going to use it for. I think the health thing is kind of a surprise to them
Me too.
about what a big deal that's become.
Yeah, if you go rewatch the original Apple Watch keynote from 2016, or 2015, 2014, 2014. If you go watch that, it is wild to see how many things Apple threw at the wall, seemingly to see just what would stick.
I keep thinking about that guy drawing the picture of the sushi fish on his watch.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, that was so dumb.
Yeah. And now Kevin Lynch who was that dude, is now in charge of the car project. Weird
Yeah.
times. But you're right. I mean, they've honed in on the marketing and the marketing in terms of the way they talk about it and the features themselves really pretty well at this point. And so I would guess that it's taken them a lot longer to get to where it is than they maybe anticipated at the beginning.
Yeah. Software. I mean, in general, I don't have really many complaints with the Apple Watch software. I do have some things I want. We'll get to that in a minute. But in terms of operating and doing what it's doing, like the way the complications work generally works. I'm impressed when they add features that I think are dumb, and then I use them and I like them, like the portrait watch face this year, where they automatically separate the person's head from the background, and then they draw the time between the head and the background. I thought that was kind of gimmicky, and then I put it on my watch, and I'm like, I like it. It doesn't work good with my dog. It works good with my kids, though. So you got that problem to work on. The little tap on keyboard that they put on this year, I thought there's no way I'll ever use that. And then I tried it the other day and it works pretty good. I feel like the software team is doing a pretty good job with the stuff they decide to ship. My complaint is the stuff that they're not shipping.
Yeah, I agree. I think the bones of it are pretty good. And again, it took them a while to get there. Like, remember we had glances at the beginning, and like they've changed what the side button does a couple of times. But I feel like they've kind of ironed that out, and they know what WatchOS is and what it's good at. But I think that, I mean, it's your note in your note in the document, you have exclamation points after it. Like, you've got to open it up to faces. You've got to make watch faces more customizable, more easily set up and configured and saved and shared. And I think at least they need to open it up to third parties.
Yeah. Yeah. There needs to be some third party model. I'm guessing the best we could get out of Apple would be like where people can submit them for approval.
Yeah. Which is, I mean, do it kind of the way you do CarPlay, right? Like you have a
Yeah.
set number of things that are possible and you have to have special permission. If that's, I mean, I think they should just open it up and let the market decide, because the market will pick winners and losers. It always does.
Yeah.
I mean, look at the app stores, right?
Yep.
There are clear things that the market wants out of the app store, and developers have to respond to that. And so, why wouldn't that work with watch faces? I don't know.
I mean, I feel like, wouldn't a company like Rolex want a Rolex face on the Apple Watch, and they could sell it and make money on it? I mean, I can guarantee you I will never buy a Rolex watch, but they could get $10 out of me to get their face, you know? And then also, like, if we let people make faces, they could come up with ideas that make more sense. Like, I really like the Explorer face on the Apple Watch, but there's a few things about it that are kind of game stoppers for me. Like, someone could make a related face to that, but give you a little more customizability. And I'm just not happy with any of the faces. I always go through this thing. Like, right now, I'm using the digital utility, or which is it called? The infograph, the one that's a computer screen, the infograph modular.
Yeah.
And I like it because I can get my timers and I can get a whole bunch of stuff on the screen. But then I keep going back to the utility from the Generation 1 Apple Watch. I keep going back to that one. I just can't get settled. And it's because they all have these compromises I don't care for. And if you like suddenly let other people make faces, I bet I could find some that I'd be happier with. And I feel like it would sell the Apple Watch. If people want these things to be cut, look at how everybody went nuts to put, Widgetsmith on and get these widgets on their home screens. Of course, we want to have more control over the thing on our wrist.
Yeah, and you brought up another interesting point there, is that Apple seems happy to abandon old Apple Watch faces. Like, that original utility watch face is one of the best looking ones they've ever made.
Yeah.
But it's kind of janky on current watches.
Yes.
It's like,
and the complications don't work right with it.
Yeah. Spend the couple of weeks or whatever it would take to tune up those old watch faces for new watches.
But that wouldn't be enough for me. I just want third parties. I want it to open up. I mean, every year they give us 2 or 3, and I feel like that is such a disappointment.
Mm-hmm.
There should be hundreds of them. Every person I know should have a different Apple Watch face, just like they have different bands. And, I don't know. Is this a thing where, just like the iPad, we're wish casting and they have no intention of ever doing this?
I mean, maybe.
I feel like we're getting to the point where that may be what we realize, because it's been long enough that it's powerful enough. The software stack is good enough. I mean, I don't know what would hold them back from doing it now. I mean, they could monetize it as a store, where you could buy watch faces.
Oh, they would have 100% turned it into a store. Apple loves stores.
Yeah. So maybe we'll get it this year, and that'll be what we talk about next year at this time. But I really feel like this is the one thing. If there's one thing you could do to make the watch more appreciable and personal to me, it would be the faces.
This episode of Mac Power Users is made possible by our friends at Memberful. Memberful is the easiest way to sell memberships to your audience, used by the biggest creators on the web, including those of us here at Relay FM. Memberful lets us generate sustainable recurring income while diversifying our revenue stream. Memberful is the platform we chose for our membership years and years ago, and it does make it easy to generate that extra revenue stream, deliver bonus content to our members, but they've become a great partner for our business. The advertising market is up and down the last couple of years, and membership has really given our company and our hosts, including me and David, a real sense of financial security that we didn't feel in early 2020. Memberful makes it easy to get there. It's easy to sign up. It's easy to set up. And you're already producing this content, right? We certainly are. Memberful just gives us the tools to diversify income based on that content. It gives us custom branding, gift subscriptions, Apple Pay, free trials, private podcast feeds, and tons more. And a new feature that I'm really enjoying is the ability to send paid email newsletters directly through Memberful, and even publishing them on the web so members can log in and view them in their browser. It's all really cool. And there's no additional fee for the newsletters if you're signed up for Memberful's Pro or Premium plans. If you're a content creator, Memberful can help you monetize your passion. Get started for free at memberful.com/MPU. There's no credit card required. That's memberful.com/MPU. Go there now to check it out. It could be the start of something really exciting. Our thanks to Memberful for their support of the show and Relay FM.
Well, watches aren't the only little thing that Apple makes. They also make a thing that goes in your ear.
Yeah, quite a few of them, actually.
Yeah.
Talk about a product that spawned a product line pretty quickly. We've got AirPods 2, we got AirPods 3, the AirPods Pro, which have the changeable ear tips. They've been out a little while now. And then we have the Max, which are the big over-the-ear headphones.
Yeah. Got them all, baby. And they're all great, honestly. Maybe I think some people aren't happy with the cost of the AirPods Max, but they're good AirPods. I mean, can you really call them AirPods? I mean, they're over-the-head cans, but
yeah, I mean, I think the AirPods, I think the branding is so good. They're gonna stick that on almost anything they can.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that there's options. Someone like me, the AirPods 2 are a really good fit, and they're still for sale. But if you want more, or the 3 fit a little bit better, you have options there too. I feel like Apple's kind of killing it with the headphone game.
Yeah, I agree. And they're I think they're smart to go for the fat middle, like something that everybody can use. You can spend a lot of money on headphones, but those people are never going to be interested in whatever Apple sells. And for me, I am just like really happy with the sound I get from all of the AirPods I own. And they're just great. I mean, I don't know that I'd add anything else to the line. Just keep making them good. Software wise, I've been having problems lately with answering calls with my AirPods, where like I'll pick up the phone and it doesn't connect. And that was real stable for the longest time, but I've noticed it's been unstable. And I don't know if that's just maybe an iOS thing they're sorting out. But lately I've gotten to, if I'm going to call somebody, I'll first open the podcast or the music app and like just kind of get them connected with something before I start making the call. Do you have that problem at all?
I feel like it might have been pretty solid, but I do have the feature turned off where they can automatically switch between devices. I don't want that. I want them to be connected to the device that I tell them to be. So
I should probably try that, because maybe I would rather have to manually switch it between devices than have to fiddle with it when I take a call.
Yeah.
But yeah, I really like them, and I use them for a lot of things. I do like the Max ones I overpaid for, but they're just so useful because my studio's in the middle of the house. When I put them on, it's like a great way to tell a family that I'm really working. I can't be bothered.
Mm-hmm.
And they sound great. I mean, you've got that too. I'm right down to the entry level AirPods, which I use all the time. I mean, I usually keep just one in my ear when I'm making calls, and as I'm getting through all my calls, I can switch the ear out if the battery starts to die in one. And I love the way the little charging case fits in your pocket. I don't know, man. I don't have anything to complain about with the AirPods.
Yeah, my only really complaint is the AirPods Pro have had some quality issues. They start rattling after a while. Apple seems to be replacing them. They seem to have fixed the issue with more recent releases. So I think if you buy one now, you're not going to have a problem. But I think they've worked their way through that. And yeah, I think it's obviously an important business to Apple. I think they are, in a way that the Apple Watch never really became the sort of cultural touchstone that like the white headphones did. The AirPods have sort of recaptured some of that for Apple.
Yeah. But then the speakers get bigger and they go on a cabinet instead of in your ears. What do you think of the HomePod line?
Yeah, I mean, what HomePod line, right? It's just the Mini,
Yeah,
which,
exactly.
we recently did our experimentation with the HomePod Minis. I think we both like them. Neither of us are using them for computer speakers. I don't think they're great for that. But, I've got a stereo pair of HomePod Minis in my studio, and I love them. They're bright orange, and that helps. I can't help but think there's another shoe to drop here. And I do think, because Siri is the interface to the HomePods, I think Apple needs to just continue to work to make Siri better and more reliable. I think most importantly, just more predictable. If it can do something right one time, it should always do that thing right. And that's not
Yeah.
always the case.
Yeah. Agreed. But also, just we need a bigger HomePod. I mean, the line started with the big one that has the great sounding bass, and I have several of them, and they have all, knock on wood, worked perfectly since the day I bought them. But I have all these friends like you who are reporting that their HomePods are just dying.
Yeah.
And my sister, one of my sisters got sick several years ago, and I bought her a HomePod when she was stuck at home, and she loves music. And I said, just put this next to your thing, yell out into the air anytime you want music. And for that, Siri works great, and she has loved that thing so much and used the heck out of it. She just called me the other day and said, "Oh, it broke. It just stopped working. I don't know
Hmm.
what's wrong." And I told her to buy a pair of the small ones, but that's not the same thing in my mind. I really feel like Apple needs a big one, and I know that, and we've talked about this over the past year. I'm sure I think they got the pricing wrong on the first one, and there is a solution where they can make a speaker that costs a little less money and still sounds much better than that tiny HomePod Mini. And I really hope next year that there's more to the line than just the Mini.
Yeah, me too.
And then there are the glasses. This has been rumored forever. Apple, for so many WWDCs, has talked about augmented reality, and they've got like this weird AR mode on the phone where you point the camera at something and it lays text over it. And none of this ever made sense in a phone, but it makes perfect sense in a pair of glasses. And the rumors are there's starting to be smoke on the horizon that maybe 2022 will be the year that Apple releases some kind of AR, VR goggles or headset or something that like they're going to start getting into this publicly soon. What do you think?
I think this is the Apple product that's going to make me feel old because I can't get excited about it. Those things just, they don't interest me. And I really don't see Apple moving into that area, making it interesting for me. I'm curious, especially on, they've talked a lot about AR, which is not, I mean, there's some gaming that's in AR, but AR also has a lot of sort of real life non gaming possibilities. And all of that's really interesting. And Microsoft has explored some of it with its mixed reality headsets. But I just don't know. I find it hard to get super worked up about it at this point.
Yeah, it seems like all the good applications of augmented reality require you to be out of your house. Like, I'm in the grocery store. Show me where the
Yeah.
Rice Krispies are,
Right.
stuff like that. And
Or, I'm in a warehouse picking an order, or I'm looking at different medications for a patient, right? Lots of really interesting things. But like, I'm at home all the time, and a lot of people are.
it's got to be portable to be effective AR. And if they're going to do something like one of these virtual reality headsets that you strap onto your head, like I have one. I have the original. What's the one that Facebook bought?
Oculus.
Yeah, I have the Oculus One. So it's independent, doesn't require a separate computer. And it's kind of fun to goof off in there. I actually find that I can even do workouts in it because I start sweating after I'm doing some of those games for a long time. But then my daughter took a picture of me wearing it, and I saw that picture, and I'm like, what a dork. I mean, I could not believe how ridiculous I looked with that on my head. And I don't know what Apple's going to do. I mean, are they going to just like lean into virtual reality and like make something like Oculus but better? Or are they going to really try and do AR, even though I'm sure the technology is too big to wear around in the supermarket? So there's just a big question mark over this. But I guess if you're going to get into it, you got to start somewhere, just like the Apple Watch.
Yeah, I think so.
But I'm not particularly excited about it. There's a good chance that they make one. I'll probably consider it. I mean, and we talk about this stuff all the time, but I like you, I just haven't been kind of sold on the utility of it yet. And I don't know. We'll just have to wait and see. But I do think that may be something we're talking about next year at this point. It seems like it.
Yeah, they're building towards it for sure. And if you talk about just the software side, we've had ARKit now for many years. Right. So they're laying the groundwork, and one of the rumors kind of says it'll be like a developer preview hardware, something like that. But I got a feeling we're going to learn a lot more about Apple's ambition here in the next 12
Maybe,
months.
maybe that's why they're not making a Mac display. They want you to strap something to your face and like, there's your display.
No.
I actually did an experiment. I wrote a blog post on it. I wrote some blog posts in space where there's like an app for the Oculus where you're like orbiting the Earth in a space station, but it puts up your actual Mac display on screen. So you can be sitting there typing on your keyboard and have like a virtual monitor. It was kind of a fun little experiment, but the problem is the resolution wasn't high enough. So I think you'd get a headache if you did it longer than 30 minutes.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. I there's something to this. Like with that Oculus, I've always wanted to go to Machu Picchu. It's like on my bucket list, and hopefully I'll be healthy enough and have the money at some point after I get the kids through college. And you have all these things you've got to put off. But maybe someday, if the stars align, I'll be able to go there. But I was able to go there virtually, and it was actually quite satisfying to feel like you were there. So, and this is very early tech. I mean, they've already replaced the Oculus I have with one with better resolution.
Mhm.
So, I don't know. I feel like this is in the future this isn't going to hold up well, this recording, because I think it's going to get so good that people are going to be like, I can't believe you made fun of that at all. That's the way we do things now. And
Yeah.
but right now it's pretty rough still, and it's just a little unusual for Apple to be getting in this early, but maybe that's what they need to do now. So we'll see.
Let's move over to services. This whole realm of Apple products that aren't hardware, aren't software, but it's sort of the glue and the content on top of, all of these, all of these
and the revenue
individual products
source.
we use.
Yeah. And the revenue source.
And the revenue source. Yeah.
Do you remember when everybody said Apple is bad at the cloud?
Mhm.
Is that dead now?
I think for the most part it is. I think that they have really built out a suite of products, even under the iCloud umbrella, that all work pretty well. There are complaints I have as a power user about I would like more control here or there, better insight into what's happening with my files in iCloud, that sort of thing. But I feel like overall, what they've chosen to do in the cloud, a lot of the syncing stuff, like, iMessage syncing and Safari data syncing, all this stuff that sort of powers their applications, I feel like I just never think about it. And that's really the goal, right? If I'm not thinking about it, it means that it's working well.
Yeah, agreed. And I feel like that they are making progress. They're making a lot of money on it. So I guess that's one reason why. But it's also the backbone of their hardware. If you didn't have an effective ground sync of your contacts or whatever, that would be bad, and they seem to have largely scratched that itch.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, for a long time, that stuff was hit or miss, and I think they earned that reputation for a reason. But I think on the whole, their stuff has gotten just a lot better kind of quietly.
Yeah.
The other shift that we've seen, you just alluded to, is that it's like a business, right? So you have things like Apple One, which bundles all these things together, or you can go out and buy a la carte. I want Fitness Plus and something else, but not TV Plus. I mean, you can mix and match these things, and in thinking about what they offer, I think the two big winners this year in particular are TV Plus and Fitness Plus. I feel like both are way better than we ever expected they could be. And these two are directly linked. Of course, Apple has just poured money onto both of these, right? They have this fitness studio, and you've talked about this a lot. All the trainers and your kids follow them on Instagram. Like there's this whole world of the Fitness Plus studio. And then they're just, of course, backing truckfuls of money up to people like Tom Hanks and, a bunch of famous directors and producers to make, for the most part, pretty good stuff on Apple TV Plus.
Yeah, agreed. And that's good. I'm glad they're leveraging that, and I hope that continues. The thing that concerns me about the business part of the cloud services is where you've got to make a choice between satisfying a hardware customer and making money out of a cloud customer. And the part of this that I keep talking about, and I will keep talking about, is photo backup. The way they give you a small amount of storage, not nearly enough to store backup any reasonable sized photo library, and they want you to pay for that. Well, that does help the bottom line of revenue for services and gets more people to sign up. But then you've got so many millions of people that shell out, around $1,000 for a new phone, but their photos aren't backed up on it. And it's like, I kind of feel like when you pay an Apple price for a phone, having your photos automatically backed up would be a really nice way to make them feel like they were getting their value.
Yep. They do have the thing now where they give you temporary space so you can transfer through iCloud.
Okay, so you know what that proves to me?
They can do it.
They have the capacity to do it. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's a business decision, right? And it's easy, I think, for a lot of people, and including me, honestly, to kind of lay that decision making at the feet of Tim Cook. But I think they could make services an even better offering if they gave people a better taste of it. Give people enough space to like learn. I mean, this is the cynical take, but this is kind of what you have to do sometimes with Apple. Is like, give people enough space to like really experience Apple Photos for a year, and I bet they pay for a year too.
Yeah, there's a lot of ways to do this, but honestly, even just give them the space. Like, if I pay Apple's ridiculous prices for the expanded memory so I can put all my photos on my phone, maybe I get more storage, and I really feel like that while in the short term you are going to make less money off your services revenue, the first time somebody loses an iPhone or has something go wrong and Apple says, oh, no problem, we got all your photos for you, just buy another iPhone and they will download, that is a guaranteed sale, right? Now compare that to the current situation where you may have a phone full of photos and you drop it in the lake and Apple says, well, sorry, you didn't give us extra money, so we don't have any of your photos. Are you going to buy another iPhone? You can go buy a Google phone where Google says they'll store them for you.
Yeah.
Because that's what they do. And so it just seems to me like looking at the big picture, on a dollars and cents, it makes sense. But also it just kind of feels like the right thing to me. Like, take care of the people that buy your phones. Make them lifetime customers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. A little surprise and delight, and that's a term Apple uses, at least in retail, goes a long way to keeping people happy.
But there's a tension there, and there will, as Apple continues to make money off services, that tension will get stronger, not lesser. And so that's something we got to keep an eye on. What's next for services? What do you want them to do? I mean, now that they're doing good with what they have, what would you like to see them add?
I would like a good focus on iCloud Drive. They're so close in some areas to something like Dropbox or Box or other services like it, but then it sort of falls down in the last mile. For me, that's just better control over what's local and what's not. We spoke about that in the cloud storage episode a while back, but all that still stands. And I think in particular, they need to continue to smooth out the experience with anyone who has multiple Apple IDs or using the Apple ID family feature, which my family does, yours does too. And it's pretty good once it's up and running. Although, and this is where I insert follow-up for like the third time on this topic, because we keep coming back to this topic.
Yeah.
The amount of storage you get, you can go to 4 terabytes total if you're on Apple One, because Apple One gives you 2 terabytes and you can buy 2 more. And we haven't seen that option in our accounts. I know I haven't.
Yeah.
And a bunch of people are like, no, it's here, and sending us screenshots of it. And it seems like, after looking at all these screenshots and talking to a bunch of people, what it seems to be is if you have separate Apple IDs for purchasing and for your iCloud. So like for us, we use my like ancient Apple ID.
Yeah. So the longest fans are the ones that pay.
Yeah.
Know?
And so I have a separate Apple ID for purchase and then a newer one for like my actually iCloud syncing. And because of that, I'm unable to add the extra 2 terabytes. It's just not an option for me. And I don't need the space yet, but you do, if I remember correctly, or you're getting close
I'm
to
getting
it.
close. Yeah, I'm getting close. Well, yeah, it's
And
a
so,
mess.
yeah, just some of that ID management stuff is like rooted in the iTunes days, it feels like. And I think it would be good for them to continue to improve on that.
Well, I suspect it's a legal problem where when I bought that movie on my original iPod account, that they're probably legally not allowed to move it to a different account. But man, like a one-time amnesty just to say, okay, all you people with these legacy iPod like iTunes accounts, we're gonna let you one time move everything. That would like solve 100% of my problems with this. And like I keep like beating myself up. It's like what I should do is literally just give up on this legacy account and just buy everything under my main Mac account at this point and just like write off, because all the music that I bought under that I don't really miss at this point because I'm on an Apple music subscription, so that's probably okay. But I bought a bunch of movies. Like, am I going to pay for Star Wars again if I want to watch it?
I mean, yes, you will.
Yeah, but I mean that's dumb, right?
Right. It is
But
dumb. No, they need to address it somehow. And I agree with you. Like the migration is probably tricky, but like just make all the options work if I have 2 Apple. Like it's so rooted in ancient technology at Apple. And I know for a fact they've replaced a lot of it, right? Like the joke used to be everything runs on iTunes. That's not the case anymore. A lot of it has been rewritten and updated, but some of it feels so fragile. And when you're talking about Apple ID management, well, your Apple ID is so much more than just those purchases, right? It's everything on your phone. I understand them needing to be careful about that, but at the same time, you are punishing people who are using things in a way that maybe you didn't anticipate.
And like in 10 years, is this, weird system of using your legacy Apple ID that you got most likely with an iPod and, the one that actually has your email address attached to it? Are you going to have to, you're still going to be able to use them both? Are they going to have to account for that? Or at some point, are they just going to give up on it?
Yeah.
And it's like, so every time I buy a movie now, am I just making it worse? And, yeah, I don't know. The way I've solved the iCloud storage problem, because like you, I do not get the extra 2 terabytes because of the way I purchased Apple One. And I guess I should look into seeing if I can purchase it. I don't know. We'll figure it out, but it's just a mess. And so I've started moving data out of iCloud drive that I would like to have there because I just don't have room for it anymore, which, is kind of beyond the point. Anyway, I think we went down a little bit of a rabbit hole, but that's something they could improve. Some other things I'd like to see them add is I want for the Mac what we have for the iPhone and iPad in terms of backup. I want to be able to get a new one, plug it into iCloud, and just have it restore to exactly what it was on the other device.
Yes, absolutely. Time Machine is fantastic, but you have to buy a drive. And then if you're on a laptop, you got to remember to plug it in. And not everybody does that. And not everybody uses a service like Backblaze. And it's like having it built in, having it as an iCloud option. People like me and you may not necessarily use it, but I would bet good money that the percentage of iPhone customers that have their phones backed up is higher than the percentage of Macs that are backed up because it's built in and easy.
On orders of magnitude, I'm certain. Because it takes work to do it on a Mac. And if you just made it built into, the Apple One service, you don't have to give it away. You can charge for it. But I think it would be something a lot of people would want.
Yep.
What about Apple policies? We've had some movement this year with the way Apple thinks about things and policies. Let's start with the right to repair changes we recently saw. What do you think?
I think it's great. I mean, the devil's in the details in terms of what parts, what components, what it does to your warranty. We don't know any of that yet, but I'm encouraged that they are going down this road. And maybe not for the obvious reason that, it'd be great that I could just replace the screen on my phone honestly, when I break it. But they're going to be designing products for people to open themselves and that has ramifications on how products are put together, and that's all good, because even if you don't want to repair it yourself, it means that repairs by third parties could be easier and cheaper. It's good all the way around, and I hope that Apple really is serious about it, and it's not just lip service with a couple of common parts, and it's really too expensive for anybody to consider it. I hope they're taking it seriously.
I kind of feel like the reactions to this is almost like a lens of how you think about Apple. Because like when this news broke that, we didn't tell you the background if folks don't know, Apple is going to start selling you parts that you can replace parts in your Mac and your iPhone and your iPad. They're even going to sell you tools. So if you want to do your own repairs, and like there's a group of people are like, oh, this is great. Apple is going to like open it up and let everybody do whatever they want to their devices.
Mm-mm. I don't think
And
it's
then
that.
I think that's one way to look at it, but it's not really objectively true. And then the flip side is, this is Apple just trying to play a game to get around regulations. And I think it's actually what they said it is. It's like, yes, if you want to buy the parts, we will now sell them to you.
Yeah.
And that's all it means. I don't think it's really a huge, I mean, it is a help for right to repair, but I don't think it solves all the problems, but it's progress. And hopefully there's more, The flip side of the one, and we worked on this outline obviously before today's show, but I think we're both kind of unhappy with the whole situation with the regulations and the 30% app revenue sharing, and just like the whole situation with the App Store and what's going on with that. You want to give a summary of that, I guess, for folks?
Yeah. I mean, Apple, since the beginning, has taken 30% of revenue that is spent in the App Store. So if I buy your $10 app, remember $10 apps? A $10 app, $3 goes to Apple and $7 goes to the developer. And the pitch from Apple was, for our 30%, we're going to run the store. We host your downloads. And people may not realize this. If you have an app for sale in the App Store, you don't have to host it, right? It's being downloaded from Apple servers. They're going to take care of editorial. It came out recently that they buy ads on Google for certain well-positioned apps in the App Store. Like, they do marketing for you. And that has been fine for a long time. And we moved into in-app purchase, where apps are free and you spend money after the fact, and it would still remain 30% cut. So now in the third era of App Store monetization, we have subscriptions. And if you're a subscriber for more than a year or two an app, it drops to 15%. But over time, developers and world governments have looked at Apple and have raised concerns that that the rate is too high, and that the rules around the App Store, like you have to use their payment methodology. That's kind of the core of a lot of these cases and complaints, is that Apple is acting in a antitrust fashion with the App Store. And I'm not smart enough to litigate that. Other people will. But clearly there are concerns, and I think well-grounded concerns, that the App Store is not going to be sustainable the way that it is, that something will give. And the 30% seems like such an easy thing to back off of for Apple. And they've even done it a little bit with like the small business program. So if you make less than $1 million a year, I believe, they take a lesser percentage, but they seem unwilling to bend on these other things. And they are betting that the courts and I guess world governments will allow them to continue to operate this way. But it seems like they risk a whole lot in doing so. And it just seems like a really silly thing to contend or to bet your entire business model against. Like, what if you don't bend on this, Apple, and then someone in the world says, hey, well, the App Store has to be a separate business from the iPhone, right? And then you've broken your business model. I just don't understand why they stand their ground over it so harshly.
Yeah, when in settlement negotiations with clients, when I'm wearing my lawyer hat, I have a standard explanation I give to them, and that is, when you're in settlement, you get to control the outcome. Whatever the outcome is of a settlement, you had a say in it. So you have some degree of control over it. If you are unable to settle, a man or a woman in a black robe decides the outcome, and you have no control over what that is. And I feel like that's where Apple is right now. It's like they could be making moves right now that would probably significantly reduce the amount of regulation they put themselves into. But if they don't try to, figure it out now on their own, it will get decided for them.
Yeah.
And they probably will not like what happens when it's decided for them. Um, and honestly, if you look at, and I don't want to get into this, could be a whole show really, and I don't think people really want to hear that from us. But if you look at their explanations of why they're doing a lot of this stuff, it doesn't really hold water, honestly. And I think that there is a true belief at Apple that, if not for all the hard work they did in making the iPhone ecosystem and the App Store, that a lot of people would not be making any of the money that they are. And that's true. But at the same time, 30% is a lot, I mean, I used to sell books through Apple, and they took 30% of every book sale I ever made. And, that hurts when you look at it at the end of the year,
It does.
And so I don't know. I feel like it seems from the outside that they're relying on the inability of governments to make any progress, which is a whole nother topic, right? But they're kind of banking on that to be able to just stick with their guns. And I wish they would, I wish they would take a different approach. I wish they would be, I wish they would be more fair. I mean, from my vantage point, what they're doing isn't really that fair to a lot of app developers. And I get that, the Apple made this economy for them to work in, but at the same time, the apps they make are the reason people buy their phones. So it's a two-way street. And I just wish they had, I feel like, Apple, there's all kinds of problems companies have. And from the outside, you often see it, BlackBerry just refused to accept reality. The famous story of when the iPhone came out, they didn't even believe it was real, and the company failed because what is Apple's, like, what is their Achilles heel? I feel it's their hubris. Sometimes they're just so set in something that they don't, I don't know. I feel like that can hurt them, which is a weird thing. Like for most companies, it's like lack of vision or lack of execution. But with Apple, it feels like hubris sometimes.
Yeah, I totally agree. And it's awkward and hard to talk about because we like so much of what they do.
Yeah.
But there's this undertone to it when it comes to the business side that just is uncomfortable, and I just don't see how it ends well for them. At some point, someone is gonna smack them around for it in a way that Apple doesn't like, and I think they're going to regret the line they've taken with it.
That's my feeling too, and I could be proven wrong. But getting back to that settlement talk, in this case, the guy in the black robe is some governmental entity, and do you want them deciding how your app store works?
I don't think you do.
Yeah,
I don't think you do.
Yeah. Overall, I mean, killer year for Apple. The Apple Silicon on the Mac, and I mean, so much of the stuff they're doing right now, I feel like they're like clicking on all cylinders. Even some of the stuff we're unhappy with, I feel like is in a period of transition, like, Swift UI and some of these. I think they're making the right moves. They're just not fully executed yet. And, I hope that they continue along that path. And the fact that it's now obvious that the Mac is a real priority, not just in their words, but in their actions, really brings me joy.
Me too. Yeah, I mean, I give them a thumbs up in what was a hard year. I mean, in some ways, we're seeing the effects of the pandemic more this year than last year because things that come out last year were kind of done the year before, right? And there's probably more of that to come. And they, like everyone else, have struggled with when to return to work. We didn't even touch. There's some other like social issues going on inside the company that some of them they've handled better than others, but I think from the product perspective and the perspective we take on this show of using their products to get your work done, there's not much to really complain about.
Yeah, I do think in 2022 the supply chain problems are going to catch up with Apple. I mean, they've been able to avoid it so far, but that's going to be a thing. Overall, I'm just so happy with the Mac that it gives me rose-colored glasses for everything that they're doing at Apple right now.
Mm-hmm.
All right. State of the Mac, State of Apple. Guys, I hope you enjoyed the show. If you liked it, let us know. I'd like to do this at the end of every year. I think it'd be a great tradition for us going forward. But, we want to hear from you as well. What do you think Apple's doing right and wrong at this point? We have a forum for that over at talk.macpowerusers.com. You can find us on Relay FM at relay.fm/MPU. We want to thank our sponsors for today, and that's our friends over at 1Password, Squarespace, and the Tech Savvy Lawyer Podcast, and Memberful. We'll see you next time.